During his meeting with Wilfred von Owen, who, as his personal attaché, had worked closely with infamous Nazi propaganda minister Lawrence Rees, asked him who was, according to him, an intelligent and charming person. If you could sum up your experience of the Third Reich in just one word, what would it be? Rees was guessing his response would make reference to the horrible crimes of the regime, crimes he freely admitted had occurred, and of the damage Nazism had wreaked upon the world. Well, he finally said, if I was asked to sum up my experience of the Third Reich in one word, that word would be paradise. The word paradise was something Rees never expected to hear from Owen. He had assumed Owen would speak of the horrible crimes of the Nazis, but why was his answer paradise? Rees later wrote that I didn't coincide with anything I had read in my history books, nor did it square with the elegant, sophisticated man who sat in front of me, who did not come to that look or talk as I had imagined a former Nazi should. But paradise? How was it possible that he could say such a thing? The question in front of us is, even after knowing the horrors of Nazi regime, so thoroughly documented in our books, in countless documentaries, and in years of work to paint a clear picture of Hitler as an evil figure, why do some questions still defy any justifiable answer? Just like other mass murders and killings, and the people who committed such crimes, whether during the time of Stalin or the Japanese criminals who committed some of the most appalling atrocities in modern history, as we know, many of their actions even surpassed the brutality and precision of Nazis, did not offer justification when captured, stating that they were merely following orders. However, as Rees further writes, the old man in the Baltic states, who had helped the Nazis shoot Jews in 1941, still believed, 60 years later, that he had done the right thing. Even some of those who had fought against the Nazis held deeply anti Semitic beliefs. Most of the Nazis Rees interviewed went against the idea of what he intentionally thought of them, as they often would claim they committed their actions because they were ordered to do so and feared for their own lives. However, Rees pointed out that it is worth trying to understand why so many of the former Nazis he has met over the last 15 years seem to find an internal justification for their crimes, such as I thought it was the right thing to do rather than an external one, like I was ordered to do so. Another important point to consider is that while we read about Nazi history in our textbooks and watch various documentaries, the people who came to support the Nazi party were not those trained to obey a party or worship an emperor, as was the case with the Japanese war criminals. Instead, Hitler gained open support largely due to his political ambitions and his powerful oratory skills. These questions always arise when reading about the Nazis. Why were they supported by the people? Why did those who were close to Hitler, his early friends, and other people around him never argued against the idea that he was doing the right thing? Why did Hitler, in his last will, declare that he never wanted war? And why did Heinrich Himmler, the man said to be responsible for horrific crimes and mass killings, write that physically exterminating a people was fundamentally un-German? And why did Reinhard Heydrich, another man known for the horrors of the regime, record that biological extermination is undignified for the German people as a civilized nation? These are some of the questions we still seek answers to, yet we often struggle to find reliable resources that can guide us to where such answers might be found and provide us with some sense of understanding. What happened in Auschwitz and in many other places, resulting in the deaths of millions, is a fact that cannot be ignored. But how all these questions and such horrific politics came into existence and ran parallel to one another is something that still demands answers and deeper clarification. Now, Rees, whom I mentioned earlier for his work in documenting crimes primarily associated with Auschwitz, recounts in one part of his book a moment in Lithuania. He recalls an army officer in his mid 20s showing him around the site of the 1941 Jewish massacres at a fort in Kunas and saying, "You are missing the big story, you know? The story isn't what we did to the Jews, it's what the Jews did to us." However, the question that remains for us is, why is there so much confusion surrounding this topic? Why are there so many different narratives and conflicting accounts of what happened during World War II? Some historians I have read even describe how certain Jews were involved in persecution or killing of their fellow Jews. And then there is an enduring question of what really happened during the final solution, who was truly responsible for these crimes. To this day, I do not have a clear answer to the questions I have raised or to those quoted from the works of various scholars. But what fascinates me as I read through these accounts is that there is no single, definitive narrative behind many of these deeply disturbing questions. In the end, I don't want this video to go on any longer, but it's important to remember that those who were killed, whether innocent Jews, Poles, or Soviet prisoners, were victims of horrific crimes. We know from history the tragic outcomes of such actions, yet the politics around us often pay no heed to these narratives. Even those who feel connected to this history sometimes fail to learn from it, instead using it to justify the wrongs they commit against others. So, in conclusion, I want to say just one thing. If we do not want to learn from history, at the very least, we should not use it to justify our own crimes or support politicians who, in their pursuit of power, distort our understanding and corrupt our minds. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you all have a good day.